Today on the show, I want to take you back to my garden roots and share with you some of the inspiration that got me interested in gardening. And I grew up in Vian over in eastern Oklahoma, so we've come over here today to look at the person who got me started gardening. That is my dad, Mr. Les Owens. So we're going to take a look at his vegetable garden today. Hey Dad, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Steve.
All right. Well, Dad, we always grew all these vegetables here, and just growing up, we were always out here. You had John and Mark and I working in the garden. But when you were growing up, you guys used to grow a lot of vegetables down in the southern part of town, down south of Vian?
Yeah, we did. We were raised on a farm. Dad was a sharecropper, and we raised a variety of different plants. We had green beans, corn. Of course, the corn we raised for our own team of horses because that's what we used to farm with back in the late 40s and early 50s. And we raised cotton, purple hull peas, hired the neighbors from the neighborhood to come around to pick when the harvest was ready, and haul the produce to a cannery in Stillwell or Alma, depending on which one was buying whatever was in season at that time.
Alma over in Arkansas,
across the border, yeah. So it was really an exciting time growing up on a farm like that, and we certainly had a large garden then because there was 4 of us boys at home. And Mother did a lot of canning, raised her own meat. I had a smokehouse that we put it in, and the smell of Morton sugar cure is one of my fondest memories of growing up on a farm. I knew we had meat in the house when you could smell that.
Well, how many acres did you guys crop down there?
I think probably 80 to 100 acres usually was the average size that we farmed back then. Having a team of horses to work it, you can imagine that would limit you to how much you could raise.
That'd help out a little bit.
Yeah, I remember the first year Dad got a tractor, I think it was 1954, and he was really proud of that tractor, but I think the mares was a lot more prouder than he was.
Okay. Well, Dad, here in the garden that we have here, we of course used to have the old house here that we moved into when I was 3 years old, and we had a garden out front, but years later we took the old house out and we built the other house, and now we've got a bigger garden. And I'll have to say this garden is a little bit bigger than I've seen you put in the last few years.
Yeah, since I've retired in November, I've had a little more time to spend in the garden, so I decided I would go ahead and just completely fill up between the fences here. And of course, my wife and I don't use all of it, but as you can see later on, I have quite a few pinto beans which we shell out in the roasting ear stage, and you kids and the grandkids all love them so much. Last year, because of the drought, I ran out before this crop was ready, so I like to have a little extra instead of running out every year.
All right, so you got a lot of...
I've got quite a few. These are Taylor improved horticultures, dwarf horticultures, I think is the name of them. And these are just now starting to produce.
Yeah.
When they're that size, they're delicious as snap beans. But and we eat them while they are small like that as snap beans. And then when they do mature to the roasting ear stage, they'll turn a pink and striped hull on them, and then we can shell them out and put them in the freezer, and they're so good.
Okay. Well, right back here you've got some tomato plants, and this looks like kind of an odd place to put the tomatoes. Did you plant these here, Dad?
No, these were volunteers that came up. We would toss our old rotten tomatoes out, and this would usually what would happen. I think this is a Rutgers that's coming up here.
Oh, the larger ones?
The larger one. This one over here with the ones that are starting to get ripe. I had yellow pear tomatoes last year, but you can see undoubtedly they were a hybrid. So I'm getting some kind of a little red cherry tomato coming there.
Okay, that's something that happens when we have some open pollination out here. You never know what
that's true.
What you're going to get in the garden. Well, right up here, Dad, I see you've got some, I guess, some Swiss chard.
Yeah.
When did you plant this?
Well, we planted that pretty early in the spring. We use it just like, mix it with lettuce in a salad. It's delicious like that. You can see a little bit of a seed in that goes a long ways. So I'll have to start visiting with the neighbors with a sack of that soon.
See who wants some Swiss chard.
Uh-huh.
Well, right up here, see, Dad, you got some young beans planted here, and kind of a tub of potatoes. What's the story
Right,
here?
this is where I had my potato crop. I had 3 rows. These are Kennebecs, and because of the late freeze, they froze. They had gotten up about 4 inches tall, and they had frozen down completely to the ground. I thought about tilling them up, but some people said leave them there, they'll come out, and sure enough they did. And off the 3 short rows here, I've got probably 5 bushels of Kennebecs.
Wow.
This is a sample of them right here.
Okay, well those are some
Pretty
nice looking potatoes from some that froze back.
Right, yeah, I was afraid because of all the rain and everything that they may not keep as well, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay. And on the fence here, you've got several buckets. What are those for, Dad?
That's my harvest buckets there. I'm always looking for something to pick the crop in, and
All right.
I keep them handy on the fence there.
Yeah, that's pretty convenient. You got some broccoli there, still producing a few little heads, and you've got a lot of harvest off of that so far?
Yes, that was a really good crop this year off of this Pac-Man broccoli, and you can see it's about reached the end of its life, so I'll move that and prepare to plant something else a little later on.
Okay, so you're always adding something else to the garden.
I try to keep the spaces filled.
Okay. And you've got a few different types of onions here that you planted this year?
Right, these onions just came from right off of Walmart's shelf out in the little packages. I've got the yellow Bermudas and some red ones, or purple ones some people call them, and then I had some white ones, which I think we've eaten most of them. I didn't get a real good stand of these sets. Sets is what I planted this year instead of the plants. I don't know if they were too dry or what, but making pretty good onions now.
Okay, they look great.
Yep.
And as I look over here, right before we get to the corn, I see you've dumped some just some grass clippings here in the garden.
Right,
and that was something I remember we used to do quite a bit, just kind of snuffing out the weeds and building up the soil.
Right, it builds the soil up, and I use it for mulch around the tomato plants and pepper plants too. It really works good.
All right.
Sure does.
Well, what kind of corn is this, Dad? It sure is looking healthy, and I think it's about as high as an elephant's eye.
That's true. This is candy corn. You can see there's 2 ears on nearly all stalks, and usually it makes 2 good ears. Some have even started 3 ears, but 2 good ears is great for a crop of corn.
Okay, well, I certainly remember being out in the garden a lot and hoeing around the corn, and always trying to be careful not to hoe down one of the young plants.
Right.
And Dad, how come you got the corn in a block instead of long rows?
Well, it gets better pollination that way. My garden is about 45 feet long here, and I can plant 5 or 6 rows of corn, and it's going to block out real good where I'll get good pollination. And you can see down through the middle there, it's got pretty good pollination all the way through.
Sure, those ears look like they're developing really well. Of course, the male flowers up here with the tassels drop the pollen, and each grain of pollen has to land on a silk on the ear here. Those are the female flowers, to create a kernel of corn. So we need 1 grain of pollen for every kernel, and you've got a nice stand of corn here, Dad. Well, as we move on through the garden here, we've got some more of these beans that we like so well.
Oh yeah, these are the first ones that I planted, and they're getting on into a mature stage. You can see the rain has covered them with dirt, but you can see the size of them. They're plumping up, and once they start drying, turning a different color, pink and striped, why then I'll know that they're ready to shell out and put in the freezer. And hopefully this year I'll have enough to last until next harvest season next year.
Okay, well, Dad, you've got a fence around the place to keep the rabbits out, and I see you're even utilizing the fence. We've got some beans back here, some Kentucky
Wonder Pole bean.
Wonder Pole bean, and we got cucumbers, we got cantaloupes growing on the fence, and just want to real quick also point out on the barn here, you've got your tools kind of up under the overhang of the barn, keeping them out of the rain there, and you got that scythe. What do you use that for?
Well, that comes in real handy when your corn is finished, and you can take that and swing it along and just cut these stalks off. And same way with the bean plants, the broccoli, anything, you know, if you're going to cut it down and put it in your compost bin, well, that works real well.
Okay. Well, Dad, you've done a real good job this year, and got lots of picking to do, and I'm sure I may get in on helping you do this a little bit.
You might do it.
Well, Dad, thanks for showing us the garden,
Well,
and
glad to
thanks
have
for
you out.
thanks for teaching me how to garden.
Glad I did.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.